Can you tell us what the red lines are for Beijing still?
The red lines are number one, the Beijing will not accept any open attacks on China's economic policy, on China's trade policy. So would never accept any bullies, verbal bullies. Okay, so this is the point I mentioned in my article. This is the first point of art of war. Okay, in the art of war, you have to understand your opponent, and Beijing is very sensitive to open attacks. Okay, that's the number one red line.
大家好，今天给大家带来的是中国人民银行前顾问以及清华大学中国实践中心与思考中心董事李道奎的一段采访视频。他这个是接受的彭博社的一个采访视频，主要是谈到了最近大家非常关心的中美贸易关系未来将走向何处。话不多说啊，让我们一起来看一下。
Let's bring in David Daoquai Li, a former PBOC advisor and now director of the Center for Chinese Economic Practice and Thinking at Tsinghua University. He joins us from Beijing this morning. David, it's always great to have you. I got to get your take on this because Steve mentioned President Trump saying it was a total reset. What do you think would constitute a substantial reset to ties for Beijing?
Well, first of all, I'm not surprised at all. In my own social media, and also I wrote an op-ed piece. I've been arguing for this. I was predicting that within 3 weeks, this was about 1 month ago, within 3 weeks, there will be a substantial negotiation and progress. So what would be the reset? I think 3-4 points. Number one, the tariff will come down to below 30%. 30%. I think both sides will aim to work on this to get this achieved before too long. Okay. Number two, both sides agree that trade imbalance between the two countries will have to come down starting from this year. So from now, the second half of to the end of this year, actions will be taken. We can talk about details. Number three, key areas of trade restrictions will be lifted. For example, China's rare earth and the U.S. restriction on export of some of its computer chips. And number four, very quickly, further negotiations in either of the capitals or both capitals will be held starting from next week. So these are the four my expected points to reset the whole thing.
Professor David here, just to follow up on that, how soon do you think we should be expecting a trade deal to get done?
Well, I would say from now on, about 2 weeks. I would give it 2 weeks. Okay, in my own op-ed piece, which I sent to New York Times, to Washington Post, to FT, and they didn't take it. Okay, I am still pissed off by them. Okay, now my predictions, my arguments in the op-ed piece is now losing its value, but it's fine. I'm happy for the whole thing. Okay, next time I send you to Bloomberg. Okay. So within 2 weeks, there will be further and detailed negotiations, and the outcome and agreements will be reached.
David, always come to Bloomberg, I'll say.
Come to us first.
We'll get it out as soon as we can, always. Can you tell us you mentioned some things that could come out in this deal. Can you tell us what the red lines are for Beijing still?
The red lines are number one, the Beijing will not accept any open attacks on China's economic policy, on China's trade policy. So would never accept any bullies, verbal bullies. Okay, so this is the point I mentioned in my article. This is the first point of art of war. Okay, in the art of war, you have to understand your opponent, and Beijing is very sensitive to open attacks. Okay, that's the number one red line. Number two is that major restrictions aiming to choke off China's future development will not be accepted. Okay, and I think these are the two things. So besides these two things, everything can be discussed. Everything will be on the table.
Can I ask you then about, because any conversations around geopolitics, and to your point, there are red lines as far as economic policy is concerned. Do you think the exchange rate was discussed? Should it be discussed? And the other thing I want to ask you is, do you think Beijing will take semiconductor restrictions as I guess, an affront to the economy? In other words, are those two items, you think, red lines, or do you think they're not?
I think they are at the very top of the negotiation list from Beijing. On the issue of exchange rate, Beijing side will argue that Beijing is very concerned about the stability of the exchange rate, perhaps even more concerned than Washington, okay? Because Beijing is worried about a fast depreciation triggering capital outflight, okay? So Beijing will make it very clear to Washington, D.C., this is an issue. We have more concerns than you do. And basically, we are on the same side. Don't blame us. Don't give us your dictations, okay, on this issue. Number two, on the computer chips, Beijing says, okay, let's talk. Let's talk about this, okay? By restricting export of computer chips from U.S. to China, it doesn't help any side, okay? Beijing will develop its own capacity of chip making, okay? So let's go to the basics. Let's have free trade on this issue. This will benefit both sides.
David, can you tell us, I mean, some of the things that you mentioned in terms of your projections are quite bold, right? Tariffs will come down to 30%. We're going to get some sort of deal in 2 weeks. What are conversations with your inner circle like right now? What brings you confidence that we can get a deal so soon? Is it the fact that policymakers in Beijing really are urgent to get something done on the table?
Okay, there are two voices from my discussions with my close friends. Number one is from multinational corporations, mainly non-financial. Okay, they are really, really concerned because a lot of their supplies are in shortage. Okay, so they literally be in the situation of stopping operation. Okay, if within 2 weeks no substantial progress is made, okay, literally, okay. The second voice is that they have access to both sides. There are many people, many insiders from from U.S. side, from Chinese side, who know each other, who have been in the government, who have been doing business. Okay, there are too many of them. They are exchanging information. They are passing messages. Okay, there are too many of them, so that the two countries would not be sustainable not to have a deal. Okay, so that's why I was making my predictions for so long.
Yeah, and the two preconditions China had before we went into this was a point person to talk to, and for the U.S. side to show respect. And it seems they've gotten those two things. Correct me if I'm wrong. What then? As we try and manage expectations going into a trade, what do you think are the potential roadblocks that between now and that point?
The potential roadblock, frankly speaking, I think comes from the U.S. Congress and come from non-business community who may link trade problems to ideology, to politics. That's the main block. Okay, for example, if some U.S. congressmen propose legislation, then Beijing will be very angry. Then Beijing may not be willing to push further. That's the main concern I have. By the way, the Secretary of Treasury, okay, I think Bennett is an extremely capable person. I have a tremendous respect from him. He has tremendous understanding of finance and business. That's why this time around we have a quick agreement, temporary agreement in Geneva.
After a deal is reached, what does this economic relationship look like, you think?
Well, the economic relationship will be reset, okay, which has already started. The process started 3-4 years ago, okay. That is, China will have its own very close friends to do international trade. The U.S. also will have its own community of countries to do trade. And to some extent, technologies and the IP issues will be relatively separate, okay? We're talking about two standards. We're talking about two sets of technologies, US, China, and perhaps Europe, 3 blocks, Romance of 3 kingdoms, okay? So, however, basic economic trade and flow will be and should be maintained. I'm talking about rare earth. I'm talking about some of the computer chips. I'm talking about exchanges of scholars and students. So this is my big picture in my mind for the future.
What does that tell us about the support, whether we get it or not, from policymakers moving forward, Dao Kui? Are we likely to see more fiscal stimulus being rolled out or not?
Yes, I do expect that. Okay. In fact, I think the first stage of fiscal stimulus has shown very good response. This encourages policymakers in China to beef up the fiscal stimulus, in particular, fiscal stimulus to boost the home appliance and the electronic production sector by the trading program, and also fiscal stimulus to help enterprise to upgrade their equipment. These two things are super important, not only for the consumers to consume more, but also for the businesses who are suffering from the ongoing trade negotiation, trade wars.
And Dao Kui, we had the official inflation report out on the weekend. The reason I simply bring that out is, do you see a path with the current cocktail of policy stimulus, and including, of course, the big ones announced mid last week, that brings China inflation back sustainably in China? And do you think there are still concerns about the lack of inflation in China at this point?
I think let me be very upfront. Okay, I think as of today, which is early May of 2025, the Chinese economy internally, I think, gives people much better temperature. We feel much warmer than 1 year ago. Okay, why is that? Because the number one issue of the Chinese economy is not trade. The number one issue is local government debt. The local governments were pushed to pay back their debt in a short period of time, which was suicidal. But now, in the past 6 months, policies have come to help. The local governments were given more new debt, new room to issue new debt, so that the local governments feel better. Local governments are not in a hurry to collect more fees and taxes from enterprises, and therefore local governments can also even spend more. So this is the main reason for the Chinese economy to feel much better than 1 year ago. So this is the year 2025 for the Chinese economy to have substantial improvement in the actual feeling of the temperature of the economy.
What about the job market, Dao Kui? I wonder, how important is that for policymakers right now to be able to bring up youth unemployment and the like, or bring down, I should say? Because Reuters came out with a report recently saying that was one of the reasons why Beijing agreed to these trade talks in some ways. How important is the job factor in all this?
The job market is actually very important for policymakers. However, it may not be so directly related to the trade issue. There are two job markets. The one job market is for the unskilled migrant workers, which is still doing well. Okay, unskilled laborers are in high demand which I think the U.S. the same thing. Okay. Meanwhile, the main concern is in the other job market, which is the college graduates. And this market will take time to recover because we have too large supply of highly skilled, well-trained engineers, and they have to adapt to new technologies. And overall, I think this takes a little bit of time. It takes 1 or 2 years for them to get retrained, to colleges to change their majors, to change their departments, for the education system to change, and also for young graduates to change the mentality. They should be willing to accept combining blue-collar jobs and with white-collar jobs. This is an issue separate from trade.
David, always great to have you. David Lee Dao Kui there, former PBOC advisor and Tsinghua University director.
好了，咱们挑几个重点一起来聊一下。首先这里提到了什么会构成中美关系的实质性重置。李道奎认为中美关系的实质性重置将包括将关税降至30%以下，旨在从今年开始减少贸易平衡的方法，取消稀土和计算机芯片出口等领域的关键限制，以及从下周开始进行进一步的谈判。这个访谈是当时关税政策还没有最终落地的时候，我们看到他预测这个30%还是比较准确的，但是像稀土芯片 这种关键性的战略物资，中美实际上都各自拿了一手。美国对中国芯片的限制还是比较严格的，而相对应的话呢，中国未来对美国出口这个稀土肯定也会更加严格。这里谈到了重启中美贸易关系的4个预期要点是什么？重启中美贸易关系的4个预期要点是：将关税降至30%以下，从今年开始采取平衡的方式来减少贸易不平衡，取消稀土和计算机芯片出口等领域的关键限制，以及从下周开始进一步谈判。从目前的一个谈判结果来看，除了这个关税降到30%符合李稻葵预测的，剩余的其他几个条件基本都没满足。所以从这一方面我们也可以看到，中美贸易关系未来还需要多轮次的谈判，才能最终达成一个令两方都满意的结果。但无论如何呢，中美贸易已经回不到过去了。这里谈到了中国政府在贸易谈判中的红线是什么？中国政府在贸易谈判中的红线是，它不会接受任何对中国经济或贸易政策的公开攻击，也不会接受旨在阻碍中国未来发展的重大限制。从这次我们国家对于美国制裁的反应来看，应该说第一是做足了功课，第二个是中国也不是之前的中国了，他不会说因为美国对中国去制裁，我们就放低姿态去迎合美国，而是表现出了更加强硬的一面。这一方面得益于中国这些年经济的发展，第二方面，中国目前是全世界工业基础最广泛，而且工业基础最雄厚的一个国家。尤其是考虑到中国的工业产品普遍还存在人口红利，价格普遍比较便宜，所以这也是中国政府的一个底气。但是最终我还是希望中美两个国家能够坐下来友好的进行谈判，最终能达成一个比较好的谈判结果。因为只有中美两个国家能够达到一个好的贸易谈判的结果，才能推动整个世界经济有序而稳步的发展。好了，本期视频就到这里，感谢大家收看。